My name is Valerie Paley. I work at the New York Historical Society. I am Chief Historian and Vice President for Scholarly Programs. I came to it much by happenstance, and I suppose when I was thinking about a career in history, this was my dream job, and I kind of made it happen very serendipitously. Started off doing a lot of volunteer work in the archives at the New York Historical Society, and parlayed that into the editorship of their journal, which then I parlayed into a curatorial work. So I have had the rare opportunity of working in both library and museum collections as a historian. I had a couple of different careers before I took an MA in American Studies, and it was after my MA that I did the volunteer work at the Historical Society and just fell into this editorship, which was an extraordinary experience for me and encouraged me professionally to keep moving on in the profession, the historical profession. At one point I thought I would be an archivist, but I was discouraged from that by my advisor, who thought it would be better if I used archivists to help me do historical work as opposed to being the archivist on the other side of that equation. And that was really wonderful advice. To me, I thought I was a little bit too old to start a PhD program. I was already in my early 40s, but it was life-changing. And I just returned to what I was doing, which I was sort of doing part-time all along. I was a graphic designer. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. I went to Vassar and was an English and psych major, and a dancer, and a professional dancer, but I chose not to continue with that and instead became a graphic designer, which was a family business and I grew up with, and did a lot of administrative work. I suppose that helped me with what I do now. But in many ways, the one thing didn't necessarily lead to another, although I've found as I've grown older that everything I've ever done in my life has somehow contributed to how I do something well now. You draw on all of your experiences to create the whole package that is you, professionally and personally. I have the reputation of dressing better than a typical historian, and I sort of dress the part, I guess. I have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies. I do a lot of the editorial and historical content. As a library and a museum, the New York Historical Society has the rare and somewhat curious structure of having two very different types of departments. One that is strictly a research library for researchers and scholars, the other being a museum with art, material culture, etc. And I think it's the historian's work to bridge the gap between the two and to create sort of content, or at least contextualize art as well as the archives in a historical way and just vet the content, if you will. So I do a lot of that. I do some curatorial work. I do a lot of administrative work. I am the dean of the fellowship program. We have about 11 scholarly fellows now working in our library, both postdoc and short term. And I also have the extraordinary responsibility of doing a lot of history installations, exhibitions as well. Historians are trained to think critically about content topics, whatever the task at hand might be. So you gather evidence and information and quickly come up with a solution if you're looking for solutions to problems. And I find that that sort of historical thinking, being a little bit more nimble that way, has helped with the work I do. Sometimes you just have to gather information, even on a topic that you're not familiar with, and be not only relevant but accurate. The New York Historical Society is an interesting beast in that it is the second oldest historical society in the country, and founded in 1804, and almost completely died 2 decades ago because of financial issues, and it's all privately funded. And over 200 years, any institution will accumulate a hell of a lot of stuff. We've got millions of objects, millions of documents, literally millions. And certainly in the library division, we have great challenges in not only digitizing, but even cataloging the stuff. A lot of it just remains uncatalogued. And it's also interesting how one catalogs library collections versus museum collections. So you can have, hundreds of thousands of papers in one item that's accessioned as one item of, there are many documents. So digitizing has been very complicated and costly. I know that we've had several attempts and an ongoing one to digitize what we have, but I think it's safe to say we will never be able to digitize everything. So often one listens to academics speak to each other, and they speak in their own language completely, and in a way that sells the work that historians or academics do. It sells it short, because only a select group of people can really understand what they're trying to do. I think that just thinking in broader terms, or if not relating in broader terms through one's written work as well as spoken work, really just does history a service, if not the historian a service. There will be of course the rare, not so rare, but the select group of brilliant historians should just stay in the academy and teach, and teach a whole new generation of historians. But for the rest of us, I think that there's something to be gained in being deployed among real people. It's wonderful that foundations like the Mellon Foundation and others are truly thinking about public history as an important arm of the historical profession. And insofar as they are now funding pre- and postdoctoral fellowships in public history at museums like mine and others, this is wonderful training, because the thing I was talking about earlier about communicating, about language that historians use in the academy versus the language that must be used outside the academy is something one learns on one's feet in public history, in the museum profession. You learn how to convey very complex and nuanced arguments in very few words. There's only so many words you can contain on an object label. People look to be entertained by an experience in a museum. And I'd say by and large, many people don't think of history as entertaining, although that's, I think, changing a lot. So what I enjoy is the satisfaction one gets of a job well done. And for me, it can be in any number of things, but in an exhibition, for example, using technology or new ways of looking at what could be tired old narratives, and then seeing the excitement that it can stimulate in people. For high school students, I have a daughter who's in high school right now. Sometimes they need to be turned on and engaged in a different sort of way. So you can ask some of them to read a book and they might be excited by it, but others have their different modes of learning. And in that sense, the public history experience, be it online even or in a museum, sometimes will create a different kind of synapse in a young person. And that's exciting. And to think of the different modes of learning, of getting at the same information through different ways, I think is a very useful tool, that you should think broader and wider than just picking up this textbook and memorizing this and coming back to me with whatever, with your assessment and see how you do on the test.